Okay, and we have our next candidate for City Council, Mario Fonda Bonardi. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us about your campaign.
Okay, I'm Mario Fonda Bonardi, and I'm probably the most slow growth candidate that's running. And I think that people of Santa Monica deserve to have that choice to choose a candidate that is really about a sustainability platform. It's really about putting our city on sound financial footing and to avoid getting caught in the crossfire like what we saw on May 31st, where the city chose to protect tourist assets, namely the pier and the promenade, and let the rest of the city burn. And a lot of this really comes down to development. I've been 5 years on the Planning Commission, and during that time, I've really pushed the sustainability issues. Our city does some green initiatives, but we have a long way to go. And I don't need to remind you that we are burning in Northern California, and we are experiencing brownouts throughout the state. And at some point, our city council, as the world burns, and it's going to hit us pretty hard because we're a beach city and sea level rise is already here. We are going to have to figure out a way of not getting singed. And that's not an immediate thing we can do, but we're going to have to start taking faster steps than we imagine because it's gaining on us. We're not making very good progress. It shows up in a number of different places. But there are real limits to growth. And once you understand that, it changes your perspective. One of the real limits to growth is that we can't build buildings over 3 stories that are net zero, meaning that they produce as much energy as they consume. And that's the trick, to make everything basically much more locally produced. And in this case, water and energy are 2 big variables for us. And when you understand that, you say, well, wait a minute, aren't we going to make better solar collectors? Are we going to be able to go 4 stories? Yeah, probably. But that next story of solar collectors, that's probably going to power our cars. We're all going to be driving in glorified golf carts in the next decade or so. All these changes are slow motion changes, but they have to be started today. Because if we are to get the whole state to net zero by 2045, which is a state goal, that means every year we've got to cut our power consumption by 4%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but try doing it with a very energy intensive city like ours. So that's basically my approach. I'm running with a slate with 4 other candidates. Each of them brings something slightly different to the table, but I would like your consideration as probably the first true slow growth candidate for our city council.
Great, thank you. And I wanted to ask you first about your response to the May 31st events in Santa Monica. You wrote in your questionnaire that it was a police disaster and a failure of command. Then you wrote with regard to the defund the police movement that you don't think defund is the right verb, specifically because of the #1 problem you'd like to solve in Santa Monica being crime. So what verb would you use to describe how you as a city council member would react to the events that happened on May 31st in order to make a better future for the city?
Well, 2 things I think have to happen. One, there has to be a redeployment of the police. And I would actually ask them, if our crime rate has been going up, and it has objectively been going up, it's not just in the heads of the residents, tenants and owners, it's objectively going up. It went down a little bit, last year, but it's been going up for the last 3 years. Then we're doing something wrong. We're doing something that's just not working. And it's a big topic. It includes both the police, it includes obviously the courts, the prison system, the social support services, the entire basically food chain of dealing with crime has to be looked at. Obviously the police are the fulcrum, but the beginning of that and the back end of that has to be looked at too. So I really would like to have a discussion, a frank discussion with the police and tell them, here's what we need to do, make some targets and let's reach them. Let's see what we can do to really change the climate, the police climate. And one of the things that's pretty clear is we're a soft target. We're not used to fighting this war. The gangs that were running the May 31st riots, they completely outmaneuvered the police. They were the guerrillas, and this was a standing army, and they were stuck. Now, were they stuck because they were told, just protect the pier, just protect the promenade, or because they didn't have enough people, they didn't call their people up? Who knows what happened? At some point, we'll get to the bottom of it. But I would start a conversation with them and say, let's be frank. Let's not point fingers. Let's be frank. We failed to learn the lessons of '94. We haven't learned the lessons of what to do next. We will be attacked again, probably on the same scale at some event. And we need to be ready. And we're not. We're not ready for the crimes we're dealing with, and we're not ready for a big event. And so we need to have a conversation with the police.
Thank you. And you also said in your questionnaire that you think that Santa Monica should only take in its fair share of homelessness, homeless individuals. Can you explain how we would determine what the fair share
I can
is?
tell you, that's an easy one.
And also how we would control that number. What's the logistical way that we
Sure.
implement it?
So a fair share comes with the idea that it's a regional problem. It's actually a national problem. We cannot solve it by ourselves. If you take the homeless people in LA County, there's about 70,000 of them, about the same population in our city, on the same order of magnitude. Our fair share of that is about 700 people. Now, currently in Santa Monica, we have beds for about 500 people. But there are 2 people who are basically homeless, truly homeless. And if you want to solve the homeless problem, at some point, you have to produce the home. People that are homeless need homes, bottom line. Many ways to do that. But in our particular case, we have a capacity for about 2/3 of what our fair share is. The other part, and if you look at the homeless population as a group, they're kind of segmented. There's basically vets with PTSD, there's people with drug issues, there's people who are truly homeless because of no fault of their own. Now the vets really, the only place big enough to solve the vet problem is the VA. And I know Shriver was trying to do a thing in the VA and he only got 54 beds, but the VA needs to step up. So in the next election, which, will be President Biden, we need to actually rotate the VA that, believe it or not, 100 years ago was called the old soldier's home, home being the operant word. And we have not taken good care of our vets in that regard. So that's something Santa Monica can do. And it's not a form of NIMBYism, it's a form of realism. Where is the land available for the homeless? As far as the other homeless issues, which are basically crime, a lot of it is crime, homeless on homeless. Crime, obviously, the continuous breaking in, car break-ins, stealing of the bicycle chop shops. It goes on and on and on and on. That is a question of enforcement. I don't think you can really deal with drug dealers with anything more than you have to arrest them, you have to get them off the street. They're simply too dangerous. So,
we have a
and last step, can I make my last step if you don't mind?
Yeah, we have to stop. We have to stop because we have 2 city council candidates in the room at the same time, and I thought we weren't supposed to do that.
Okay, well, you tell me what you would like to do. If you want me to
Sorry
leave.
about everybody, sorry about that. I don't know how it happened, but Gleam, the next candidate is back.
John, do you have a call on that?
It's all taken care of. Gleam is back in the waiting room.
Thank you.
Let's move forward.
Okay,
Sorry.
let me finish on how it's, like I said at the very beginning, it's a regional problem. So the state, our wonderful state, that could fire up all the penalties in the world against the city of Santa Monica because for some reason we didn't want to do or not too happy about 9,000 new units. Those same penalties should be applied to those cities that are not doing their fair share in dealing with the homeless. And you allocate a fair share based on population. So if Beverly Hills is supposed to get, let's say, choose a number, 400, let's say, homeless people, and the bill for those 400 is $3 million, choose a number to house those people, to support those people, then the city gets fined that amount goes into a fund that the state then allocates and finds places for homeless people. The homeless people are not going away. There's no way for them to go to. They are here and they are unfortunately going to increase. And there's a lot of suffering and pain there. And we have to have a solution for that. They're the extension, they're the very bottom of the affordable housing issue. There's a continuum that we're dealing with. They're the people who need the most help. And our residents are basically fatigued with, we've been doing the same thing, and we're still here. We're still dealing with the continuous problems of homelessness. Mike, I interrupted you, but please ask me the question you had in mind.
Is that my turn?
Yeah.
I appreciate you being so thorough in the answering the questions that were submitted. You mentioned that one of the opportunities if to address housing shortages would be to convert existing office space to residential use. Where did that idea come from, and how efficient do you think that would be in Santa Monica?
Okay, let me tell you where it came from. I've been writing with a group of other architects in the Smart Column in the Santa Monica Mirror and originally in the Daily Press, and we've been talking about those solutions. One of the problems we keep having is that when we build new housing, we inevitably destroy cheaper, older housing. And this is a way of adding new housing, which we need for affordability issues, not for population issues, but for affordability issues. Be a way of doing that that would not involve destroying existing housing. Right now, we have an oversupply of retail, oversupply of office space, and probably many of us hopefully will go back to work, but many of us won't. Either we will be out of work or we're very happy working from our homes. So you have acres and acres of this floor space that's really not utilized. Most buildings, most commercial buildings have an oversupply of parking because they were built to commercial standards, not residential standards. If they're recent buildings, meaning the last 30, 20 years or so. If they're very old buildings, they have very little parking. But many of the buildings that are at the lower tier of, let's say, office quality are actually lower than what NMS is charging you per square foot to move into one of their new buildings. So what's happened is the rents from commercial are starting to line up. The bottom of commercial is lining up at the top of residential. So now we're entering an area where this is feasible. This wasn't true before, but now everything is a little bit upset now because no one knows where the rents are going overall because of the pandemic, but eventually we're going to get there. And landlords are looking for tenants, and there's tenants waiting. Operators are standing by to move into your city. And so we have an opportunity here to do something that's non-destructive. It's adaptive reuse. The parking is already available. We're already paying the penalty of the traffic for those commercial uses. So let's get the benefits of what we're really talking about is realigning our housing job imbalance. Our city has a tremendous housing job imbalance, more jobs than housing. As we reduce jobs by taking over retail space, we increase housing, we get to more of a stable condition. A lot of our traffic issues might be alleviated by that. And also more people will be literally able to walk to work or bike to work or even use micromobility if you want to do that. But I think it's for our city, which is blessed with a lot of basically jobs, and those jobs now have gone off-site for our purposes. And remember, all of these trends did not start, with the pandemic. They were already in motion before the pandemic. Our promenade retail was crashing, tourism was crashing, obviously office space was crashing. All these things just got accelerated by the pandemic. So we're now in a brave new world, and there's opportunities here. There's things that we can do. And the last thing I'd like to say is that the greenest building is the one you don't tear down. So if there's an opportunity to adaptively reuse a building, let's do it. Let's take advantage of that. A new building will take you 2 to 3 years to build. An adaptive reuse of an existing office building for residential use might take you a year and a half. It's much quicker and cheaper. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Next question. Okay, I'll go ahead and ask another one.
Ed has his hands up if he's.
Okay, yeah, let's go to Ed.
Hi, Mario.
Hi.
Hey, very quickly, Miramar. We know that the big objections are, one, the high-priced condos on top in the current plan, the ingress and egress on 2nd Street,
Absolutely.
and as well as on California. So let's, just for the sake of concept here, let's eliminate 2nd and California from the equation. Let's just look at the condos.
Yeah.
If the objection to the condos is that the city loses the revenue that it would otherwise get if they were rented.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is this: if the Miramar paid the city the value of that TOT in lieu of renting those, would that eliminate for you the objection of those condos?
If you could calculate what the TOT would be over the life of the project, it would be definitely worth considering. Um, and I have to preface this because I'm on the Planning Commission and will be probably hearing this project. I don't want to indicate how I will vote for it, but I can give you some of my considerations. I'm not going to give you the answer, but I can give you some questions. So yes, the condos have to be addressed in one way because they really will end up acting as stealth hotel rooms. There'll be, there'll be basically a way that the Miramar will be avoiding what would otherwise be its tax obligation for the city. So that's definitely a danger there. The other thing, like most big buildings, it's not a net zero building. It's going the wrong way. It's increasing demand. It involves the demolition of, 3/4 of the buildings on that site. So again, how much damage can we do to our urban fabric and still meet our sustainability goals? That's a big question. And then obviously you talked about the last question, which is the impact on the neighborhood and the traffic issues. They did not look at keeping the entrance on Wilshire. They did not look at the city's plan. The city's plan is actually to narrow Wilshire between 4th and the ocean in the long term because they want to do similar to what they did with the esplanade between the transit station and the pier. Eventually there'll be a light rail station, the metro stop, somewhere in 4th and Wilshire and all that. And they wanted an esplanade going to the beach. So to the pier, the Palisades Park in this case. So that discussion about how this big object will interact with that future esplanade, that hasn't happened. They did not consider those issues in the EIR, which I think is, again, deficiency on the EIR part. So I don't think this thing is quite ready for prime time, but those are the issues that I see on the surface.
Right. So then your answer is yes, probably if the value could be worked out, you would consider keeping the condos.
Yeah,
The
they're
value.
glorified. They're basically hotel suites, big suites,
Right.
PGS
Okay.
suites. But
Just wanted to be clear where your Rubicon was on that.
sure, okay.
Okay, and let's go to Derek.
I just want to commend Ed as well for using the term Rubicon and finding a way to work that in. Mario, what are some of your endorsements?
I have no endorsements yet. I've applied for SMER. I've applied for the Democratic Club. I've applied for the Committee for Educational, and that's about it. Sierra Club. So those are the ones that I've applied for, but
Okay.
none have matured yet.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Dami, did you have one?
Yeah. Of course, housing is always a big issue in Santa Monica, but you've been really big on sustainability. What are your thoughts on self-sustaining power within Santa Monica? Do you think we could, put enough solar panels up within Santa Monica so we would have self-sustaining power within the district? I mean, I've studied it a bit, and other issues too, like self-sustaining water, situations like this, especially with the COVID situation. We see interconnected world sometimes has hiccups. So
Right. Well, first of all, it's a question. Thank you for the question. It's a question that I've been struggling with and thinking about. And it comes down to, like I said earlier, we can do all the power we need if we stay at 3 stories or less and still meet our, let's say, our electric car requirements and obviously all of our grid requirements. I think part of the discussion of power for the city is in about 8 years when the airport opens up. We have it now slated as a park, and it would be, for us, it would be a park in the wrong place. It's in the corner of our city, which everyone would have to either commute or walk and all that. So I think part of that park should be basically broken away so parts of that park could be moved to where it's more useful for our residents. For instance, at 5th in Arizona. But that's a big piece of land there. And it could be used for power production. It could be used, and we're talking windmills, PV. It could be used for water retention and water storage, which our city desperately needs. It could be used for urban agriculture. It could be used for, obviously, housing, homeless housing. It could be, basically a big game changer for our city to pick up all the things that, quote, we can't afford, we haven't been able to do. And obviously, power generation is really important. And I'd like to add one last thought to this. when we're talking about these long-term sustainability issues, it always feels a little pie in the sky. It always feels like, oh my God, they're talking, there's kinds in the street and they're talking about sustainability and blah, 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 But what it really comes down to is at some point, we not only have to do our fair share, meaning shrink our ecological footprint. Listen, even though we're in the Clean Power Alliance, where does that clean power come from? It all comes from the east of the San Andreas Fault. So in the next earthquake, all those windmills, solar collectors aren't going to feed us. They're going to be gone for an afternoon or 10 or 50. And so we do need to pull in a little bit, pull in our ecological footprint, become more self-sustaining. And that means that at a certain point, for example, you asked about power, all of our schools should be self-sustaining in power. The money we're spending on classrooms to build classrooms for students that aren't here. Why are they not here? Because we didn't build the family housing needed for the families that would use the school. But let's say we put that aside for now. All of our schools should be net zero buildings. They have a lot of surface area. They could generate all the power they need. They could also have the capacity and room to store it. And the last thing I'd like to say is when we start getting the heat waves, the really big heat waves, those schools are going to be refuges where people can go and get air-conditioned spaces, get their phones recharged, and get a break. We're not going to have snow days. We're going to have heat days. And again, we're looking downstream and you say, why do we have to do it now? Well, now is the only time to do it. And I appreciate your question about power because power is the key. 20% of our power is spent pumping water over the mountains, over the San Gabriel Mountains. It's like.
I thank you for thoughtful answers. Appreciate it.
Appreciate that. And Mario, I've got to let you go, but I have to ask you one last thing. So you kind of reworded a lot of the questionnaire. And so there was one thing that you changed that actually substantially changed the meaning of the question, where I had asked you about police union money and you changed it to say you would not take money from city unions. So I just wanted to ask you straight up, yes or no, if you pledge to not take money from police or law enforcement unions, organizations, lobbyists, or PACs.
Absolutely. And I said that because you did not have fire in there. And I don't think a city council person should take contributions. I'm willing to be endorsed by them if they want to, that's their choice. But I should not take contributions from people that I might be deciding as to how to negotiate or what position to take. I think that's sort of too much of a built-in conflict, just like I think a conflict with developers. It's the same issue. We'll be approving projects. I don't want to be beholden and there shouldn't be an appearance of conflict of interest.
Got it. Thank you so much, Mario. Appreciate you stopping by.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.